Sometimes we need a fresh challenge in sailing, and one of the ways you can achieve that is by switching to a different class. But that decision, which boat you go to, am I the right weight for it, then which boat do I buy in that class, are the people in the class people I'll get along with, are all tricky decisions to make. And so I spoke to Ben McGrane at Hyde Sails, who's had a lot of experience in different boats, to see what his advice is. Now Ben, in your role, you inherently have to sail a number of different dinghies and yachts. How do you find it when you switch between them?
I suppose part of that is I've done enough of it that it sort of becomes a bit of an easier task. But I think also at the same time, it's my most enjoyed part of the sport. When you get into a new boat and you've got that whole process of learning how to make that boat go and sort of the beginning of that journey rather than necessarily, sailing in the, while I might go in a class and then leave a class and come back to it, I've sort of always chosen to move around rather than just focus on one boat anyway.
When people are switching between dinghies, there may be various reasons behind that. They may be a little bit disillusioned with the class that they're currently in, or they're looking for a different challenge. It can be a time though where they could make an expensive mistake. What advice would you give them when they're looking to get into a class?
Yes, I mean we're sport for choice, aren't we? Really, in the UK market, and I think that's sort of does mean there's a few ways in which you can catch yourself out, and a lot of it I think is making sure you do your research really, whether it be identifying a boat that you're the right size for. That matches your aspirations of sailing, whether that's club racing or a local circuit, or take the Fireball or the 505 next year, which have both got their world championships in the UK. That can kind of be a catalyst or a driver for people to suddenly go, oh, I quite fancy having a go at that for a couple of years and jumping into a class. I think within that though, it's what are your goals? Like what are you looking to achieve in that time frame? And are you the right size for the boat to sort of sail it in the first place?
So there can be multiple reasons as to why you switch class. You've just mentioned there, it may be because a major event is coming up, or it may be because at a different time of life they've changed weight or are looking for something different to do. But when you get into that class initially, you've made your choices, how do you get up to speed quickly?
Yeah, a bit of a minefield really, isn't it? But I suppose what would I always look to do? You do your research. So never be afraid to talk to people in the class. Try and pick on those people who are at the front of the fleet, ask them questions, particularly when you come off the water. The boats that were going well, what was their setup that day? And actually with that, it's really nice to see some classes really starting to introduce training within events and debriefs after the sailing to try and share the information and, picking on a few of the good boats to really sort of share what they're doing. And I think that's a great part of our sport, that sort of fleet activity. But yeah, there's always a lot of tuning guides out there. Even if you're using sails that are from a different manufacturer, I would generally read every single tuning guide because it just gives you that overview of what settings are being used across the wind range, whether it be the rake or jib setup positions, all those kind of things. Have a look through all the tuning guides, videos on how to sail a boat. If you take the 505 for example, there's Mike Holt's done some great videos in the past on how he sails a 505, and it's something we've been doing with our tuning information. Trying to really sort of go a bit further beyond something on a sheet of A4 paper that sort of goes, well, when we're sailing the boat, we move through these modes, and these are the reasons why. And I think the more you can sort of look around and see what information there is, the better start point you can have for getting going. And then probably the other one really is, it's I think it's really easy to go sailing in a boat on your own and sort of believe you're going really fast. I can go out in the 505 here from Hanville and we're the fastest 505 in the Solent. The reality is if you don't go and find other boats to sail against, you don't really get an understanding of the modes you've got to sail in, or you can work on the boat handling side away from other boats, but when it comes to how you race, how you go fast, you really need to find those other boats to line up with.
You mentioned there the classes which have tuning events, and they'll quite often say have a tuning day on the Friday or the Saturday and then an open meeting on the Sunday. Even before you're in the class, is it worth, say, going along, seeing what you can learn from people, talk to people within the class, and there you might even find the right boat for sail, and also just see if you get on with people in that class?
I think event attendance before you've even gone into a class is definitely a way of getting a feel for it. As you say, if you go somewhere for a day or a weekend, you can immediately kind of understand how a fleet is. If one of your goals is, well, I want to go sailing, and on the Saturday evening I want to go to the bar and have a couple of drinks and that side of things, then you kind of need to make sure that's part of the class, don't you, to avoid sort of disappointment when you get there. And even with that, matching up in a class where you've got friends, or but making sure that everyone is actually doing the events and travelling, or all that side of things. So and even in that, with that in mind, I can remember going. I was actually there buying an RS200, but turning up at Frensham, and the Terrors were there having an open meeting, and you immediately got a feel of what the fleet was like. A bunch of the parents who weren't even members at Frensham were on the water helping run the racing. And you immediately kind of get this, wow, this is actually a pretty friendly class, and everyone's kind of getting involved, mucking in, trying to make the event a success. And so, yeah, definitely a lot to be said for that.
We've seen people who stay in a class their entire sailing career. They are just a one-class person. But when you switch classes, what does it bring to your overall sailing, the experience, and can you then go back to a previous class with extra knowledge?
I think definitely, and I think at heart, I suppose I'm a skiff sailor. That's where I do your toppers, and then I went 29ers and then 49ers, and so my earlier life was this route of asymmetric skiff sailing, and I still think that is an influence on how I sail a boat now. So I might approach sailing a Merlin differently, or than someone who's a pond sailor. But I think there's always been that case of you can take skill sets from one boat or one class, learn something new in going racing in a solo that makes your boat on boat tactics better, where you're racing in a close, slow speed 30 boat fleet. It's all interchangeable. I hear a lot of people always saying when they go up to the OK from a solo, or they change from a solo to an OK, about the sort of the kinetic side and of making an OK go fast downwind, and then it's skill sets that they learn there that when they then come back to a solo, you've upped your skill set. And so I think there's always been a lot of that, in the same way that when I sailed a Contender, I had a slightly shorter leach on the main, and I high wired on the reaches, and just did everything differently because of how I'd sailed boats in the past.
Going from that skiff background where you've got flat bottom boats in the International 14, the 49er, and then say going into a Merlin Rocket where you've got a completely different hull shape, that upwind sailing, you're going from a planing boat to something where you're effectively in displacement mode. That's a really different style. So how do you convert quickly?
Well, it's broader than that, isn't it? You take international 14s, or 505, one weekend's a mirror or an XOD, and then you're back to going upwind planing in a 505, and I think it's again, because I've done a lot of it, it becomes easier to jump from boat to boat, but I'm also kind of consciously aware that when I get back in a mirror, having not raced one for a couple of months, it takes me a day or two to kind of get the feel again, and how you steer the boat differently, and how you move your body weight. You have to calm everything down because it's a little boat and I'm a big person, or the XOD, calming all the steering down to basically not inputting. There's sort of, I suppose, key traits with every boat that you kind of have to really sort of focus in on, and again, I think that's something you can learn from others. And different people will sail boats in different ways, but it's yeah, the moving around thing is a challenge, and I suppose within that, like, give yourself a chance. Like, if you do step into a new boat, don't just immediately expect to know exactly how to do it. It's a bit of a journey, and you've got to learn the new skills and really kind of buy into it, that it's going to take you a little bit of time to get there.
So having a bit of patience, absolutely key there. But what about if you've started in single-handers and then moving into double-handers, or vice versa? If you're a single-handed sailor, making sure that you get on with your crew or your helm must be utterly key.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic, that one, isn't it? I think that, it immediately becomes more to it, because, it's actually kind of a conversation I had with Penny Clark last year, who helped us out a bit, me and Russ, with the Flying 15 in the run up to the Worlds. And it's, she obviously does a lot of coaching, and one of the key things she was sort of saying was, making sure that you set your goals. Like, what's your goal? And I think that, whether that be, your personal goal, but as soon as you then get into a double-handed boat, like, making sure that you're actually on the same path. That one of you's not going, well, I want to go and win the World Championships, and the other one's going, well, I just, want to go club racing. And, so making sure you align on that, and that you're going to be able to get time on the water together, conflicts over calendars with different family holidays and all that kind of stuff. What are you going to be able to do? How much are you going to be able to do? Does it all fit in? And then, if you're going from single-handed to double-handed, going from that sort of quiet, no-talking environment to suddenly actually having to tell the person on the trapeze wire that you're about to tack, it's a journey. Again, I still think one of the best things you can ever do double-handed, it's not always necessarily, helms are generally smaller and crews are bigger, but swap round, go sailing, experience the other person's, job within the boat. I always think, one of my key strengths as a crew is that I've been a helm, and vice versa. Because I helm and crew, I kind of, get what the other person's going through. So, as a helm, steering to make sure that you're actually steering the jibe at the rate the crew can jibe, rather than crossing the boat in 2 seconds and going, what are you doing over there? Why haven't you kept up with me? And at the same time, as a crew, recognising that, your role fundamentally is to make the helm's life easy. And I think, you start to, focus in on, if you, new to sailing together or new to double-handed sailing, what are your strengths? One of you might be good at tactics, one of you might be good at boat speed, or, and trying to make sure that you're leaning on, the strengths of each other to get the most out of the performance.
So if we're going to summarise this, the key things, first of all, talk to the people in the class that you think about approaching. Make sure you're the right weight for it. If you're going to double-handed, make sure you've got the same goals as whoever you're sailing with. And then just have a go in the boat.
Yeah. I think that key point on the end there, get a chance to have a go. Quite a lot of the classes have, demo boats that you can borrow for a weekend, or get, I think the solo fleet have got 2, one in the north, one in the south. You go and do an open meeting, borrow it for an event. The 505s have got a demo boat. And I think even within that, most of the time someone will, kindly let you have a go in their boat. I think it's a real key thing to going, before you spend a lot of money, is this the right boat for me?
And there will be people out there who are feeling a little bit stale with their own sailing, as if they're just doing a single class and they're thinking, I need a new challenge. Would you just say, go for it, but with those pieces of advice?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's a good way of rejuvenating your passion in the sport. I think is to reset the challenge. I know that when I started winging a couple of years ago, it was a real sort of having windsurfed since I was in my sort of late teens. It was suddenly like, oh, I actually can't do this. Like like to the point of getting a bit beaten up by it all in the first couple of 2 or 3 times out. But I think that's actually, when you look at it, it's been a great journey. Learning something new skills, everything else. It's and I think sailing's the same. That going from single-handed to double-handed, or going from a hiking boat to a trapeze boat. It's a good way of finding a new challenge.
Well, Ben, many thanks for your time and advice there. I think a lot of people who are thinking about a new challenge will find what you've just said extremely useful. So great to hear from you.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for watching today. We're going to continue bringing you videos like this as well as sailing events and new products. So please do subscribe to our channel using the button down here, and take a look at sailworld.com and yachtsandyachting.com for the latest news in the world of sailing.